Ali, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Where are you calling us from?
Vancouver, British
Are you,
Columbia.
you're Canadian, aren't you?
Yes. Well, actually, I'm dual U.S. Canadian.
Man, that's
I'm
you
kind of
can't
both.
do
I was born in the
can't
U.S.
do yeah, you can't do that nowadays. That's inexcusable. You can't do that sort of stuff.
This is what they tell me. Yeah, this is what I read on the news.
um, yep, man. Really, thank you so much for joining. Rick
Thanks
was
for having
really
me.
excited to get you on, and to be quite honest, I had never heard of you guys. Um, but going back and listening, I mean, I can see why you guys are really popular overseas. I can't believe you're not bigger here. You know, just the music is contagious. You all look like you're having fun when you play. I mean, why? How is this not happening? And Rick trying to
I,
get
I
in.
feel like
Why is
I
Rick
feel
trying
like
to
it's
get in?
happening. I mean, I do feel like it's happening. I feel like we've been very fortunate, and we have received a lot of love from the United States and elsewhere. It just hasn't been in the mainstream media as much. I feel like somehow it hasn't managed to cross over into radio land and all of that.
Yeah.
But there certainly is. There's an audience down there, and there's a lot of love there that we
How
feel for sure.
how did you get hooked up with this band in your Canadian US?
Well, I was born in the U.S., but I actually never lived in the U.S. Um, I I was going to university in Canada, and I was
Well,
studying. I was outside of music, and
okay.
I
I
just
was going to
started
ask
playing.
you, yeah, if you were a
Yeah,
music guy.
are we? Oh, have we already started? Is this the?
Yeah,
Is this the?
yeah, yeah,
Oh, we have. Okay,
yeah.
great. Wow, right into it. Um, yeah. Well, I was born. I guess I should start a bit earlier. I was born in the U.S. and but I grew up in very young. We moved to the Middle East. My dad got a job in Dubai,
Okay.
and I grew up there. And I got into a really good university in Canada to study engineering. Hey, Rick.
Yeah.
And and at that time, I was very focused on just being sort of a scientist. Like that was my vision. And I was in the Toronto area, and I finished my Bachelor of Engineering, moved over to
Oh,
Vancouver.
wow.
Yeah, and I've lived in Vancouver ever since. And started doing a Master of Engineering. I was studying vibrations and wave mechanics, and kind of got into drumming then in my mid 20s. I had a really good friend that was a drummer, and he kind of guided me in the important things that I needed to do in order to sort of just become better instead of sort of wasting time as a lot of beginner drummers do, and as I was certainly tempted to do, just trying to do really overly interesting things. He really helped me focus on the things that would make me a truly better drummer. And then I started sort of joining bands after a few years and realized like I could kind of do this. And in my sort of freelancing phase as a drummer, the lead singer of Mother Mother, Ryan, and I both got hired by another singer to be in her band, and that's where we
Okay.
met. We became friends, and and one thing led to another. And Mother Mother already existed at that point in time, and when the existing drummer of Mother Mother left, Ryan called me and said, "Hey, we got this tour coming up, and would you like to sort of jump on the chair and see how it goes? And if all goes well, the chair's yours." And for me, it was a no-brainer. Like they were my favorite, not just my favorite local band, but perhaps my favorite band
Yeah.
at that point. I really loved Ryan's writing, his approach to music, the depth in his lyrics, and just the variety of music that he was capable of producing at such a high, sort of such high quality. Everything really had this very strong attention to detail and depth and intelligence to it that I just found it captivating. So for me, it was a no-brainer. I was like, yes, please, I want to do this. And then
Yeah.
I dove in, and one thing led to another, and here we are, 18 years later.
When you first started playing, who were some of your influences? And why did you decide to start playing drums?
Oh, very good question. I remember vividly the first time I heard Soundgarden's "Bad Motor Finger." I was a guitar player as a kid, and I wasn't very good. I mean, I loved to play.
Yeah, same.
I loved to play songs that I could just learn by ear. I didn't know a lot of theory. I really got into sort of, as a little kid, I started learning Iron Maiden songs. And then when Nirvana came along, even though the stuff was quite simple, I just fell in love with it, like deeply in love with Nevermind. I would play along to a whole bunch of Nirvana songs that were so easy to play and sing along to, and like have sing-alongs with your friends. And so I got into sort of that emerging grunge scene. But
Hmm.
then the first time I was in a CD store, and I saw the Bad Motorfinger CD, and I thought, that's an interesting cover. And it was one of those CD stores where you could say, hey, can I listen to this? And you go and put it in a
Yeah.
machine, you put on headphones. And as soon as I heard Rusty Cage, I thought, whoa, listen to the drums. Where is the one? The guitar started in one place. The drums, are they playing a different one? Are the snares on the one? Like, what's happening
Yeah.
here? And then Outshined came after that. And then I started to hear like that, just the way that Matt Cameron approached odd time and made it feel so natural, even though
Right.
it was these odd numbers. And you didn't really question it. You just kind of fell into the groove with him.
Right.
And that's when I thought, that was the first time I noticed, wow, drums are amazing. There's just a whole world in here that I could get lost in. Um, and so I really started listening to the drums, and I was always enamored by them, but it was tough to get on a drum kit. And I was studying to be a scientist, and so I didn't have a drum kit. I didn't have room to put a drum kit. I didn't have the money for a drum kit. I was a student.
Right.
Um, so it just kept percolating in my mind for years. And then when I was doing my master's in Vancouver, by that point, I had a little bit of money, and I got an electronic kit. Excuse me, one of those old school Roland TD10s with the black
Yeah.
pads and the small brain, and
Do
you
you
could
still
plug
have it?
your. No, I
Oh,
sold it. Luckily I've been fortunate enough that I could upgrade from that.
yeah.
Um, and I could plug my CD player into the auxiliary in, and play along with everything that I wanted to
Yeah.
play along with at that point. So yeah, that was kind of the beginning.
Did you fall into that? I was working at a CD shop back then also. And that was a big selling point for us. Like you could hand us a CD and we would let you go play it or whatever. Did you fall down that trap of all the other Seattle based bands, all the grunge and all that sort of thing?
Oh
Was that
yeah,
your thing, or was it mostly like Soundgarden and Nirvana?
I would say Soundgarden and Nirvana really did stick out as my favorites there. I did listen to a bunch of the others, but I would say that those two stayed with me. Um, there were some other bands I think that came out of Seattle that I was really into. I can't necessarily remember a lot of them right now. There was a band, I wouldn't call them a grunge band, but they were a Seattle band called the Posies, and they had
Yeah.
an album called Frosting on the Beater.
Yep.
And I absolutely adored that album too. The drummer on that, I don't know his name. I think he only played on that album, but his playing absolutely blew my mind. And those
Yeah.
songs were just so beautiful.
I always ask this question. Like when I started playing drums, started playing drums a little later, and was a failed guitar player, played trombone in school, and um, when I first got my a kit, I was thinking because of the music I was playing at the time, I thought I had to have that same sort of big arena style kit, with the two chinas facing
Oh
you,
yeah,
and
yeah.
you know 20 toms and a kick over here for no reason, it's just sitting there, that sort of thing. Did you fall under that influence when you first started, or were you more like looking at Cameron, for example, who plays a 5-piece or 6-piece, I think, but we're looking at those guys and just going, you know what, this is all I need.
I kept it really small. I kept it
Okay.
really small because, well, again, I was influenced by a really good friend of mine who is a professional drummer in Norway, actually. We grew up together in Dubai. His name's Siadat, and he played in a bunch of Norwegian bands, and he played a very simple kit, and he was so musical and could make so many sounds on that. And simplicity was really was really his go-to, and he really sort of pushed me to be very as pocketed as possible, and
Mm-hmm.
just use like the pieces that you need in order to really serve the song. So very early in my drumming development, which I did as an adult, I was keeping it quite simple. I didn't have a very complex kit, and I was trying to be as practical as possible, because at that point, as I was beginning to start playing in bands and answering ads and classifieds and stuff, I already knew, like, these guys, they don't want some drummer with a big kit. You don't want
Yeah.
to be pulling that big thing into venues and having to set that up. You want to walk into some place where you're going to play some tiny room with, 5 other bands and this little, shoebox of a stage,
Right.
and just be able to get the job done well,
Yeah.
and shine as in as professional a way as you can, and go from there. So I didn't fall into that trap then. However, as sort of Mother has progressed, the kit has certainly grown. I still only have the one rack tom. I do have 2 floor toms, a 16 and an 18. I use a big kick, a 24-inch. The one rack tom is a 12 and a 13. I switched that out. Just the one snare, a whole bunch of cymbals, which, as you know, we all love.
Right.
Um, and I use a sampler, like an
Okay.
electronic trigger device. So, that helps me create a lot of extra percussive noises, and that sort of brings a lot of the variety into the kit beyond what would be the standard drums and cymbals.
When you first started, were you taking lessons at all, or were you trying to go the
Yeah,
self-taught method?
yeah. I was mostly self-taught, but I had a few different teachers that I did a few lessons with around town. And they certainly helped me. I also made a lot of friends in the drumming scene, and I'd always um, sort of bug them to say, like, how did you do that? And like,
Yeah.
you make it look so easy, the way you use your hands and the way you kind of blend these textures. Like, what's your approach? So, and as these people became my friends and my peers, I would consistently try and glean the wisdom that they had, which was far greater than mine. A lot of these guys, they've been playing since they were 5, and
Right.
they're so gifted and so knowledgeable that they were encyclopedias of drumming information for me.
Yeah.
So even though I didn't take, like, regular lessons with just 1 or 2 teachers, I gleaned a lot from these other drummers that did help me
Yeah.
develop my technique.
Yeah. Same thing for me. Was working at a record store, a music store when I started playing, and we had all jazz musicians that taught, and one of the jazz drummers that taught there taught me so much. Just, we'd have a pad out, you know, just during the day goofing off, and he would show me, how to stick control and things like that. And man, when I learned a ghost note, I could, people were moving out of the way. My head had swollen so big. I was like, this whole new world had opened up to me, and but I was still playing a big kid. But yeah, that ghost note, man, it was like, wow. So
Yeah, it really adds a dimension.
it,
Really adds another
it
dimension.
does.
Yeah.
Man, who you telling? It's funny though, but I think that's one great thing about the drumming community, and I may get some hate on this, but it feels like with the drumming community, and you probably feel like this, is that you meet another drummer, and if there are sticks available, you guys are going to talk about drumming and show each other something, or you're going to just
100%.
chat, where there's no egos, there's nothing, you know, to go on. But I was going to ask you, you guys do big tours, right? You play Wembley and these other arenas and things like that. Is there anybody that you have played with during these tours where you've stood on the side of the stage and just watched them because you're, wowed by them or anything like that?
Oh, most tours. I've been very lucky that most tours. I mean, especially at our level, you end up touring with acts that are quite seasoned, and so you're standing there going, okay, this guy. Every drummer has developed over the years unique things to their approach and their voice that really is. You can always find room for growth of your own playing by watching
Right.
them, and especially for me, it's like I'll sit there and go, okay, the way this guy does this and this and this, there, that's very special, and the more I watch them, the more I kind of manage to sort of just by osmosis naturally begin to
Yeah.
absorb some of that and then go away and work on it. And I mean, as you know, and as we all know as drummers, it really is a language. And the more you hear that language, the more you absorb of that language, and the more you can speak it yourself in a more natural way. Um, most the most valuable of the kind of experience that you were asking me about comes when we play festivals. I mean, I've seen Josh Freese play in, I don't know, 6 or 7 different bands, and every single time I am amazed at how well he does just that thing that band does. Because then I've seen him play with, Sublime with Rome, and I was like, wow, it's like what a player. I saw him
Yeah.
play with Sting and do, the Stuart Copeland stuff. And it was still sort of this reggae, ska infused stuff, but different. He did it differently and really did the Stuart Copeland thing with that Josh Freese swagger and precision. I mean, Stuart Copeland was a very important drummer for me as a kid. And then seeing clearly how Josh Freese was influenced by
Yeah.
him and did it his way. And then, in those kinds of situations, in the festival situations, that's when I really try and take advantage and go, okay, there's this great drummer playing over here. I got to go and, get as close as possible
Yeah.
and
Watch.
try and
Yeah.
absorb as much of that as I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We used to have a big music festival here every year called City Stages. And I was the drum tech for the whole place. So
Oh,
if,
nice.
the bands would just fly in and we used SIR to set up each stage. So we'd get a stage plot and I'd have to set up the stage, the drummer's kit. And I did the same thing. I can't tell you how many different drummers I've stood on the side of the stage and just watched. And, and it's always the guys you don't expect. It's always those, the guys that aren't a name particularly.
Mm-hmm.
They're just a road seasoned drummer of some sort, and they just, they're on all the time.
Yeah.
How do you, from a mental, I'm gonna switch gears completely, since you come on as an older drummer, I'll say, mentally, have you had moments where you want to talk yourself out of it, like an imposter syndrome sort of stuff? Does that happen with you, or
Oh,
if you have any
yeah.
sort of mental blocks, say in the studio, or something just not right that day? How do you deal with stuff like that?
Oh, man, every time it's you really hit on a very important point there. It's every time it's a bit of an emotional experience because the imposter syndrome and the oh my god I can't do it and everybody's better than me, and it is energy that your mind starts to expend that it doesn't need to waste
Right.
on that.
Yep.
It truly is a waste of energy, but it is a natural consequence of being a human being in this world. You
Yeah.
compare yourself to others, you question your self-worth, you question your own abilities, and it definitely is something that I still wrestle with daily. Let's say daily. I mean, I'm very methodical because I mean it kind of really worked for it during my upbringing because I loved math and science and that kind of thing, and it was like everything is a real method there,
Right.
and And so naturally that translated to my approach with drumming. And so what I try and do is prepare in advance so that that kind of thing doesn't happen to me. The imposter syndrome and the just the challenges of feeling like you can't do it. Advanced preparation for me has been my biggest tool to avoid feeling the insecurities or feeling like I can't do something. Because if I can go and spend hours in a practice room with my, with my laptop and record something and loop it with the click, and then, after a couple of minutes, like just stop and like sit back and listen, and then hear where maybe the groove becomes awkward, or the parts that are great, and then go in there and zoom in on where I am with the click. Where's my kick? Where's my snare? Are they lining up with the click? Should the snare be a bit later?
Yeah.
Where are things sitting? Doing that has been the thing that has served me well, so that I avoid those challenging situations of like, this isn't going where I want it to, or like I can't do this, or I'm an imposter, or I'm nervous. Because if I've done it 1,000 times by myself and I know that I can nail it, then I know I'm going to get up there and play this song better than anybody else in the world can play it. Not because I'm better than them, but just because I've done it 1,000 times more than anybody else, or 10,000 times more
Right.
than anybody else. And it's like I try and avoid that feeling, because I guess I find it hard to conquer that feeling. If it starts, it's in a sense, it's already a bit too late, because the anxiety sets in and I'm distracted and the flow is broken.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it kind of goes back to like that. The thing Bruce Lee used to say was, I don't fear a man that kicks 10,000 times. I fear a man who practices one kick 10,000 times. You know,
Yes,
so
that's a good one.
going back to your preparation, what are your kind of your get readies to go on stage? What are some of your preparations? Do you play just with a pad or something, or do you guys practice like a full band and kind of get warmed up, or how do you do that?
No, we don't. We always do sound check when we can, but we try and keep the sound checks as minimal as possible to conserve energy, because we prepare a lot. We do rehearse a lot. We try and be very clear on everything that we're doing before sort of we go on stage. But I think for me, and probably for everybody else, but I guess particularly for me as a drummer, the day is a very important structure that I try and um, apply each time. Getting my body and my mind ready are really important. Like I do yoga, I stretch, I do myofascial release with the lacrosse ball and like a foam roller,
Yeah.
and just try and get the body sort of limber and flexible, but strong and firing beforehand. I do use a pad, and I try and do a variety of dynamics on the pad several times throughout the day. I'll often get up and stretch, in the hotel room. I'll do sort of a lot of the physical stuff, and I'll do some light pad hitting during the day. I love to use Benny Greb's gap click to sharpen my mind.
Okay.
And I do random exercises throughout the day at different tempos and just dive in, just so that I can feel like at any moment I can kind of drop into a tempo. Have you used Benny Greb's gap
No, I
click? Have
have
you?
not. I'm a totally self-taught drummer. I picked it up so fast, and it was amazing how fast I was able to play it. And I just through the years, I just play what I play and just do it. I'm a big John Bonham fan, and
Oh, who isn't?
you know I believe less is more. Strip
Hmm.
my kit way down. I've learned little things. I talked to one of the other drummers I had on. We were talking about, I think it was Gabe from the band Gob. We were talking about how you could hit up near the rim on a head and you get a higher pitch. So you could start there on a fill and then come down that tom, and it sounds like you got a couple of toms, versus
That's a
just
great
that one,
idea.
hitting in the
Yeah, yeah.
center. And I told him, I had a drum instructor friend of mine that lives here tell me, he said, a drum set isn't the instrument. Each component of the drum set is the instrument. So you're playing a bass drum, that's a separate instrument. You're playing a snare, it's a separate instrument. You're playing a cymbal, that's a separate instrument. And it's up to you to bring it all together with your four limbs, and just kind of think of it that way. And, just through the years, I've taught myself, like you, being fortunate to stand on the side of the stage and watch players, and just do it that way. But I've not had to get as technical as you're talking about, just because mostly I've played in cover bands, or I've filled in the occasional gig with some regional bands. So, I don't really have to get that intricate into stuff. But I'm not knocking it. Good for you. But I'm just,
I
and the
love that
thing is,
concept of yours, that the concept of hitting near the rim and then moving in towards the middle, and then the pitch gets lower. That's really
yeah,
cool. It reminds me of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh, well, I was just going to say, we used to, a 90s cover band I was in, we used to cover Working for the Weekend by Loverboy. And there's this, at the end of it, he does this fill, the drummer does. And back then he had this huge kit, starting probably at a 6 and went around to, and he never used half of the kit. But on this one particular, the ending of the song, he, goes through the whole toms. So when I started playing with these guys, I started doing that. And I was like, that's kind of okay. There's my new, I can get a new sound, and I have enough stick control that if I want to hit there, I know I can hit, that sort of thing. So that's how that
That's
started.
awesome.
Yeah. What were you going to say? I think we
Well,
cut each other
it
off.
reminds me of, again, very, very early in my drumming development. Like yourself, I used to try and get myself into situations where I could be close to drummers. We used to have a jazz fest. We still do have a Vancouver International Jazz Festival, and it was quite significant, especially back then. It is quite significant, but back 20 years ago when I was starting out, I used to volunteer to be a drum tech at this jazz festival. And after the first couple of years and beginning to play some shows around town and establish my name, the jazz festival used to give me some of the more significant gigs to just turn up and be a drum tech. Now, most of the time I didn't have to do anything. Most of the time I would just turn up, the drummer would have their own stuff, and I would just say, listen, if you need a hand, I'll help you carry stuff. If you need anything, let me know. I know you got your drums. But often international bands obviously wouldn't bring their drums. And so there would be a number of kits backstage at each venue where, you'd go and help them select what they needed and bring it out, and maybe help them with the tuning or tune it up for them if they asked you to. So I learned a lot about teching then. And one of many, many talented drummers that I was fortunate enough to be close to and have discussions with and observe at close range was a man named Luke Flowers from the Cinematic Orchestra, a band that I absolutely loved. A real jazz drummer, really fantastic. And he said something very similar to what you were describing, except he put it a little differently. He said, every drum is an infinite number of instruments unto itself. There's a spectrum of sounds that you can create here, from the rim to the middle to the side of the drum. Each one of them has an infinite number of possibilities. Like you're never going to run out of options in terms of sounds that you make. And you really see it. I really saw it in his playing. And so your story really reminded me of that.
Yeah, I was, one year, Phil Collins played here, and he did his big band thing where he did like Genesis songs and his songs, but with a big band. And his tech set up his drums, and I was standing there, looking at it, and I was like going, there's something different about it. So Phil came out to do sound check, and I just was standing there, and he walked by, and I'm like, are you playing a 20 now? And and he was like, a drummer, turned around, his handlers were like, he'll sign things later. I'm like, I don't want anything signed. I just want to talk to the guy. And he came over and he walked me over to his kit and he showed me all the things he had changed. And of course I'm right-handed, he's left-handed, but he was like, you're free to get up there and sit behind my kit if you want. And I went, what? And it was such a cool thing for me. Right there, see the one below the album cover? That's signed. That's yeah. He signed a drum head and gave me a photograph of that kit.
Very cool.
But yeah, just to be able to talk to him about drums for a minute was just mind blowing, and make, contrast that to, I grew up in Houston, to this old drummer that I knew. His name's Speedy Williams. I don't know his real first name. Always knew him as Speedy. When he was 90-something years old, the guy was still out playing. And I went by his house one day to pick up some parts for a drum set I was building. And he goes, hey, let me show you something. And I had to help him sit down behind the kit. Man, he got those sticks in his hands, and it was like just Neil Peart. I mean, this guy was unbelievable at that age. And then after he showed me, he was done. He was like, okay, that's it. Have a good day. He kicked me out. I was like, okay, well, thanks. They reach a certain age, they just get like honorary or something. But yeah, I've had some of the best discussions with people, where I've been fortunate enough to be in a situation where I can, like watching Rage Against the Machine on the stage when they first came out, just blown
Lucky
away.
You.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, like the record store, CD shop I was working at, the Sony rep called us and they're like, hey, House of Pain and Rage Against the Machine is playing. Do you guys want to go? But it's in Atlanta. And I was like, hell yeah, I'll go. So we drove over there, me and a friend of mine, actually, ironically, a drummer friend of mine. And the rep got us up on stage on Tom Morello's side, and we got to watch them play and watch the audience, and it was like, walked away just like, what, I felt exhausted. I was like, what the hell just happened? Who is this band, So, and then to think
that's
back,
amazing, isn't it? That is amazing. When
got to see Brad Wilk.
Yeah.
And they after House of Pain finished, we got to hang out backstage a little bit with them. And it was amazing, to be able to talk to someone like that. I talked to him about his hip hop influences and all that. So, but let's get back on task. We can probably trade stories all day long.
Of course, easy. So, we're drummers.
Yeah. Are you mentioned clicks when you practice? Are you using clicks live? I would assume so. Am I wrong?
Yeah.
Okay.
We use clicks and backing tracks, and there's the the light shows on time code and all that. So
oh wow, okay.
There's not everything is on click. There's a bunch of stuff that isn't, but most of it is. At this point, it's bigger shows and particularly in North America and a few spots in the rest of the world, it's arenas. So we're trying to really bring that big show feel to those situations.
Are you using any sort of triggers or anything?
Yeah, I do. I use a Roland SPD SX Pro, and just some pretty standard drum and percussion sounds, and 808s and that kind of thing where appropriate. We
laugh when I hear
we make all our own. Sorry?
I always laugh when I hear an 808, just because of the history behind it, and just think back, when it first came out and stuff like that. We had one in the shop and just playing that one bass sound, that 808 bass, trying to reproduce LL Cool J's songs and stuff. So it's fun.
Yeah.
Do you use anything off of that?
It's still firing.
I know, man.
Everything.
So do you use anything live, like off of an 808? The old school 808 sounds? Do you use any of that sort of stuff live?
No, we usually, between Ryan and myself, we usually end up making our own samples.
Oh, okay.
Where we'll pull things like, neither of us are particularly well versed on the actual original sounds themselves and their history, but we'll just scroll through a sound library and go, this kind of sounds right. Maybe we need to tune it bit differently. Maybe we need to add a layer just to give it a bit more sort of cut off the top. Maybe we want to add some reverb. So we do end up like really producing the sounds for each individual song. So nothing is really like off the shelf ready. Oh, there's the sound. Bam, we're done. That's it. It's usually like, we really got to make it fit in this rich tapestry because the band's got a very thick sound. There's the girls play synths, both of them do play keys. Mike, our bass player, he's got a wealth of bass sounds that he's got coming out, and he plays a bass synth. Ryan has a very wide range of sounds that come out of his guitar, and they're very big, they're very powerful, they're quite varied, and they're our backing tracks. So the band has a very full sound. So very often, if I am pulling in drum sounds, there's got to be a bit of attention paid to like exactly how they're going to fit in to the greater whole.
Yeah, that makes sense. What is the band songwriting process? Since you used to play guitar, do you ever come to the band and say, hey, I came up with this riff, or does that happen for you, or is Ryan the main guy?
The process is generally Ryan usually brings fully formed song structures to us, usually fully or half formed song structures to us, and then we'll flesh it out as a band. And it's usually a lot of that stuff happens, these days happens sort of via email. He'll say, hey, here's something. And then sometimes it'll have drums on it, and sometimes it won't have any drums. And sometimes he'll send me a version, or these days, I think he usually sends a folder, and it'll be like, little stems, so that any of us can then pull them into our digital audio workstation and then add and replace bits and send ideas back and forth. So there'll be some brainstorming that happens separately. And then at that point, there have been some times where, the song might not have a bridge, and, I've composed like little bits that go, hey, I just kind of threw this in there. And if it passes the Ryan test, he goes, yes, then, if he likes it, it becomes part of the song.
Yeah.
And then, hey, I get a songwriting credit. So there have been those instances where I've certainly managed to contribute to songwriting and gotten some songwriting credits there. But for the most part, in a very overall, like more than 90% way, Ryan is the creator of the Mother songs.
Yeah.
He is the brains behind that operation.
So what do you do on when you guys aren't touring? What are your hobbies?
I play soccer.
We won't judge you if you're crocheting. Anything, we won't judge you.
I would not be embarrassed to admit that. I play soccer. I absolutely love it.
I do too. Played in college.
Sorry?
I said I played in college.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that sport. That, I guess, is my favorite pastime. I have for a while there. I was
let me ask you, who's your favorite team?
I am not I'm not a fan of a particular team, but I love teams that play well. Like I like the chemistry of a good team that plays the attacking game, that holds on to the ball, that moves it creatively. I see soccer I like to compare to jazz. It's free form, but it's organized. It's musical. There's a rhythm to it, especially when you watch teams like Barcelona or Bayern Munich. It's like they really have a structure that they all agree on, and there's freedom within that structure, very much like jazz. Yeah. So that's these days I really like watching Barcelona. I like watching the exciting teams that like to move the ball around and hold on to it and attack. So like that's a big hobby of mine.
Maybe Arsenal?
Arsenal, absolutely. Arsenal, I like Liverpool, are great to watch. Man City, even though they had a rough season there, they're great to watch when they're on their game.
Yeah.
So stuff like that. I'm still pretty nerdy, and I like I do straight to say I do like writing computer programs
Do you
in
really?
my spare time. I spend a lot of time on planes and in buses where there's not necessarily a lot to do. So you get your laptop out, and sometimes you need to do something that isn't music. And
Yeah.
these days with AIs and the large language models, if you know some coding, which I do from my engineering background, you don't need to do a lot of the hardcore programming
No.
yourself.
And I'll tell you, my twins are both programmers, and one of them is championing the use of AI at his company.
Wow.
Yeah, he uses it to check code, and if he's tasked with doing something like you're saying, he'll use AI to create the base and then expand from there with his own right base, I guess, to kind of get
Hmm.
started. But yeah, he's been tasked with the company he works for to champion AI use. We don't use it a lot
It's a
where I work at.
superpower. AI is
Oh man, tell
AI
me about
is is a superpower that we've created for ourselves. It really is
it.
incredible what you can do with that stuff.
I box now. I gave up soccer. Just knees were shot, but I was getting my coaching license, and I had to go over to another state to get my other license. And my girlfriend used AI to plan our trip out. To found the best place to stay, most inexpensive place. Um, places to stop along the way, kind of make it a road trip. On the way,
Hmm.
and it was like, it's free. It's like right there. Why not use it? You know, um,
Absolutely.
man, I love it. I think it's great. I've got author friends that are, they're like, AI is going to replace us. I was like, nah, it'll never replace, because I think it always needs that human aspect of things. So,
Yeah,
um,
I think so
so
too. Yeah.
do you do like, have you explored anything? Just getting back to the kit real quick. Have you ever thought about adding, a smaller tom or an octobon or something, just for some sounds, or something to add to the tapestry of what you're playing? Have you ever thought about any of that stuff, or,
Well,
or do you
with the
get it all with the
electronics,
rolling?
I kind of leave a lot of that to the Roland. Like the kit has gotten to the point where it's maybe as complex as I want it to be at this point. I mean, I've got a
Okay,
hex rack, which really is great. The Yamaha. I mean, I'm a Yamaha guy,
right,
and with the hex rack, it's fantastic. I got rid of so much hardware with that stuff, and it really neatened things up. And I've gotten to a point where I thought, this is really good, and it makes our text life a lot easier, especially when you're rolling up to festivals, and you're not getting a sound check, and you got such a limited amount of time, and you've got
right,
very often, you're playing 45, 60 minutes because if we're going and playing regular leads, we're generally not headlining. We're not quite big enough for that kind of thing
right.
yet. So you don't get as much time. So it's sort of nice to keep it simpler for both myself and for the techs. And when we do have our own headlining shows, sometimes I do like to take a bit of extra stuff around. If we're doing a full headlining tour, I do take a bit more with us. But for example, we're about to head out on a European run that's mostly festivals, and because of a lot of the logistical concerns, and I try and keep it simpler. It's also a bit better for my sanity and my focus. Like I don't need a lot of stuff. I don't need a lot more stuff. I feel
Yeah, that
like I've
makes
gotten
sense.
to the
Yeah,
point where like what I do have really works for every song in the band. What I have done is I've added more auxiliary pads that I trigger so that when I do play the electronic sounds, it's not just, getting on the actual unit, the
yeah, yeah,
electronic
yeah,
unit
yeah.
itself,
Yeah.
but I've got some other triggers spread around. So my arms are moving around the kit a bit more. I can spread them around and then incorporating those electronic sounds into beats that I'm already playing with
Yeah.
the organic drums. becomes a lot easier because you can kind of place these things sort of wherever you want based on how you're going to be playing that song on the organic kit. So if it's going to be a cowbell and I want to play it with my right hand, but the SPDSX unit is off to the left of my hi-hat, it's like I can now put a pad like, right on top of the kick drum where, it's where I would put a cowbell, say.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I bring in the other textures these days.
Well, let's, we're coming up on an hour. Let me ask you one final question. What is your philosophy towards playing drums? And what would you recommend for someone just starting?
And I think this is probably something that you must hear from a lot of drummers that you speak to here, is that at the end of the day, 99% of the people out there are hearing a song and they're feeling something when they listen to that song. Anything that the drummer does that enhances those important parts of that song is the most important thing that the drummer is doing. You got to serve the song, emphasize the dynamics, subtly lead the listener into from one section of the song to the next section of the song. Emphasize power on notes where they're necessary, leave space where necessary. Serving the song and making that song the most powerful experience is by far the most important part of our jobs. When I listen back to, and it's funny, I heard the Candlebox drummer, I think it was, speaking on your podcast a little while ago.
Who was that?
And he was talking about Nirvana a lot. I'm sorry, I forget his name, but it was great to listen to. And he was talking about Nirvana.
BJ.
Yes, it was BJ.
BJ
yes.
Kerwin. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, a fantastic conversation that was. And he was talking a lot about Dave Grohl's playing on Nevermind, which was a very big album for me. And it's so simple, his playing. It's so simple. But what he does for those songs on that record is just otherworldly. It's so powerful, his playing. How he does his fills, where he leaves the spaces, how he introduces new sections, fills into the song itself.
It was funny, some of the interviews I've seen of him going back and listening to Nevermind, and him talking about, that Phil, I stole that from the Commodores or something. From the Motown stuff. Yeah. And he's like, I stole that, and he names the song. You're like, oh my God, I never put the two together. You're like, light bulb just came on. Well, Ali, I really appreciate it, man. Thanks for coming on, dude. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having me.
Stay in touch. Rick's got my contact information. Feel free to reach out, man, anytime.
Certainly, and right back at you. If you ever want out to a show, Rick has my contact information too.
Yeah.
Let's both be in touch, and hopefully we'll meet each other out there
for sure
somewhere.
When do you think you guys may make it to the States?
We're looking at a few different possibilities for 2026. Nothing is concrete yet, but we are aiming to come back next year for sure. Man, yeah, just got a new album out here. It just came out last week.
And what's the name of it?
And it is called Nostalgia. It's our 10th album. And
that's
so,
crazy.
I know, unbelievable. We're very fortunate to. I mean, how many bands do I know personally that have made it this far? It's few and far between. So I think I speak for the entire band when I say we feel very fortunate to be able to say that.
Well, thanks, man. Thanks for coming on. I hope the tour in Europe goes perfect. Yeah, anytime. Maybe we do one when you make it to the States next year. We'll get you back on and talk about it. Yeah. All right, Ollie.
Thanks so much.
Have a good rest of your week, man. I'll talk to you soon.
You too. Take it easy. Bye.